The shuttle landed hard on the crystal platform, and the pilot did not apologize. Sergeant Cale Morrow grabbed his bag, stepped out into the pale blue light of Serapis Prime, and looked up at the tallest building he had ever seen. The royal palace of the Volanthi Dominion rose like a frozen wave against the sky. It was made of something that looked like glass, but was not glass. It bent the light in strange ways, throwing soft rainbows across the landing platform. Everything here was beautiful. Everything here was delicate. Morrow felt like a stone dropped into a bowl of water. He was not supposed to be here. Not really. The Galactic Compact had a program called Cultural Exchange, and someone in the diplomatic office had decided that putting a human soldier inside the Volanthi Royal Court would be a nice gesture, a sign of cooperation. Nobody expected it to matter. The post was ceremonial, a pet from a death world, placed in a pretty cage so the aliens could feel generous. Morrow knew all of this. He did not care. He had his orders, and he followed orders. A Volanthi officer met him at the gate. The alien was tall and thin, with silver-blue skin and large dark eyes that had no visible white in them. His limbs were long and moved with a kind of liquid grace that made Morrow feel clumsy just by standing still. The officer wore a uniform made of something that flowed like silk and shined like metal. He looked at Morrow the way a person might look at mud on a clean floor. "Sergeant Morrow," the officer said. His voice was smooth and musical. "I am Lord Itherin, Chief of the Royal Guard. I will show you to your quarters." "Thank you, sir," Morrow said. Itherin turned without another word and walked into the palace. Morrow followed. His boots made heavy sounds on the crystal floor. Each step felt too loud. He noticed that Itherin's feet made no sound at all. They walked through long hallways filled with light and color. Volanthi courtiers moved in small groups, their voices soft, their clothes flowing. Every single one of them stopped and stared at Morrow as he passed. Some whispered to each other. A few pulled back slightly, as if he carried a bad smell. Morrow kept his eyes forward. He had been stared at before. It did not bother him. His quarters were in the far wing of the palace, as far from the royal chambers as possible without being outside the building. The room was large and beautiful by any standard, but the message was clear. He was being kept at a distance. "You will attend the morning briefings," Itherin said, standing at the door. "You will wear the court dress provided. You will not carry weapons inside the inner palace." "I was assigned as a protector," Morrow said calmly. "You were assigned as a symbol," Itherin corrected. His dark eyes held no warmth. "Do not confuse the two." He left. Morrow set his bag down on the bed and looked out the window. The city of Serapis spread out below him like a jewel box. Towers of crystal and light stretched in every direction. Floating transports drifted between them like slow birds. It was peaceful. It was perfect. Morrow did not trust it. The next day, he met Princess Viathi Solraneth. She was the third child of the Volanthi Emperor, and she carried herself like someone who had never been told no. She was smaller than most Volanthi, but her presence filled whatever room she entered. Her skin was a deeper blue than the others, almost violet, and her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She looked at Morrow with open displeasure. "So you are the human," she said. "Yes, Your Highness." She circled him slowly, studying him. He stood still and let her look. He was used to being examined. "You are heavier than I expected," she said, "and your eyes are unsettling. They sit forward on your face like a hunting animal." "Yes, Your Highness." "Can you say anything else?" "Plenty, Your Highness, but I was told to be polite." Something flickered in her eyes. It might have been surprise. It might have been irritation. She turned away from them and addressed Lord Itherin, who stood nearby. I do not want this creature following me around the palace, she said, loud enough for Moro to hear. It is an insult. Your father insists, Itherin said. My father is being diplomatic. I am being honest. She left the room. Moro watched her go. He said nothing. Over the next several days, Moro fell into a routine. He attended the morning briefings, where he was given no useful information. He stood in hallways while courtiers walked past him without a word. He ate alone in his quarters. He explored the palace when no one was watching. He noticed things. The security systems were old. Not broken, but outdated. They were designed to catch political spies and social embarrassments, not armed attackers. The guards were beautiful soldiers who moved with perfect form and had probably never been in a real fight. The doors had elegant locks that a determined child could break. Nobody seemed worried about any of this. The Volanthi had not faced a real threat in generations. They believed they were safe because they had always been safe. Moro knew that was the most dangerous kind of thinking there was. On the 7th night, there was a formal reception. Hundreds of diplomats and courtiers filled the grand hall. Music played from somewhere above. Light danced across every surface. Moro stood against a wall in his ill-fitting court dress and watched. He watched the way people moved. He watched who talked to whom. He watched the servants. Because servants saw everything, and most people saw nothing about servants. One servant caught his eye. A thin Volanthi, carrying a tray of drinks. The servant moved correctly, smiled correctly, bowed correctly, but something was wrong. The way the servant shifted weight from one foot to the other was not quite right. The balance was off by a tiny amount. It was the kind of thing only someone trained to watch bodies in motion would notice. Moro did not move. He did not react. He simply filed the information away in his mind, the way he had been trained to do on 6 different worlds and in 3 different wars. Something was not right in this beautiful palace. He could feel it, the way an old sailor could feel a storm before the clouds appeared. He looked across the hall at Princess Vayathi, who was laughing at something a diplomat had said. They all were. Moro leaned back against the wall and kept watching. Moro spent 2 weeks learning the palace before he said a word about what he found. He walked every corridor. He counted every door. He memorized every guard rotation and every gap between patrols. He mapped the blind spots in the surveillance systems and noted which areas had no coverage at all. Then he sat down in his quarters and wrote a full security report. It was 30 pages long. It was detailed, professional, and devastating. He brought it to Lord Itherin on a quiet morning. Itherin took the document, glanced at the first page, and set it down on his desk without reading further. Sergeant, Itherin said, folding his long fingers together, the Royal Guard has protected this palace for over 2,000 years. With respect, sir, you have not needed to protect it in over 2,000 years. There is a difference. Itherin's dark eyes narrowed. You come from a world where everything is trying to kill everything else. I understand that this makes your species nervous. But this is not Earth. We are civilized here. The security cameras in the East Wing have not been updated in 40 years, Moro said. The emergency lockdown system has never been tested. Your guards train for ceremony, not combat. If someone wanted to get into this palace with weapons, they could do it in under 6 minutes. Itherin stood up. He was a full head taller than Moro, and he used that height now, looking down at the human with cold authority. Your report has been received, he said. You may go. Moro went. He was not surprised. He had served under enough officers to know when his words were landing on deaf ears. But he kept a copy of the report. He always kept copies. The only person in the court who treated Moro with basic kindness was a young handmaiden named Ilya. She was quiet and gentle, with pale silver skin and a nervous way of moving that suggested she was not born into court life. She brought him food when he missed meals. She warned him when certain courtiers were in bad moods. She did not seem to think he was beneath her. "They are afraid of you, you know," Ilya told him one evening as she set a tray of food outside his door. "Afraid?" Morrow said. "I have not done anything." "That is why they are afraid. You watch everything and say nothing. It makes them uncomfortable. The Volanthi like to know what people are thinking. You are very hard to read." Morrow almost smiled. Almost. "I will try to be less mysterious," he said. "I do not think you will," Ilya said, and she walked away. 3 days later, the explosion happened. It was small, as explosions go. An energy conduit in the wall outside Princess Vyathi's private chambers overloaded and blew outward in a burst of heat and light. The official explanation would be a maintenance failure. Old wiring. Bad luck. Morrow was 2 corridors away when he heard it. He was running before the sound finished echoing. He reached Vyathi's door in 9 seconds. 2 Volanthi guards were standing in the hallway, frozen in shock, their hands raised to shield their faces from the smoke and heat. Morrow pushed past them without a word. The door was jammed from the blast. He hit it with his shoulder once, twice, and on the 3rd time it broke inward. Vyathi was on the floor near the window. She was conscious but dazed, coughing from the smoke. A piece of the wall had fallen near her, glowing with residual energy. The heat in the room was intense. It would have burnt a Volanthi badly. Morrow crossed the room, crouched over her, and shielded her body with his own. A second burst of energy cracked from the broken conduit and hit him across the back. He felt the heat tear through his shirt and scorch his skin. He did not move. He stayed over her until the conduit died and the room went quiet. Then he picked her up, carried her into the hallway, and set her down gently against the far wall. She stared at him. Her large dark eyes were wide, and for the first time since he had arrived, there was no contempt in them. Only shock. "You are burned," she said. "It is not bad." "Your back is smoking." Morrow looked over his shoulder. She was right. He brushed at it with one hand. "It is not bad," he said again. "How did you not flinch?" she asked. Her voice was very quiet now. "The heat alone should have driven you back." He looked at her for a long moment. "That is what protectors do, Your Highness." She did not argue with him. She did not call him a creature. She just sat there against the wall, looking at him like she was seeing him for the first time. That night, Vyathi sent for him. He went to her study, a room filled with books and soft light, and she asked him to sit. He sat. She asked him about Earth. So he told her. He told her about the oceans that could swallow entire Volanthi cities. He told her about the storms that tore buildings apart, and the earthquakes that split the ground open. He told her about the animals that hunted in packs, and the diseases that evolved as fast as the medicines meant to fight them. He told her about the ice ages, and the meteor that killed the great lizards, and the fact that humans survived all of it, every single catastrophe, through stubbornness and cooperation, and a refusal to lie down and die. Vyathi listened without interruption. When he finished, she was silent for a long time. "Your world is terrifying," she said. "It made us what we are," he said. "And what are you?" "Survivors." She looked at him across the soft light of her study, and something changed between them. Not trust, exactly. Not yet. But the beginning of it. The first crack in the wall she had built between herself and the strange, heavy, unsettling creature from a death world. Meanwhile, Morrow had not stopped watching. He had noticed a reptilian diplomat named Ambassador Drayan Hask arriving at the palace more often than his schedule required. Hask was Korvathi, a species known for political games and long plans. He smiled too much and spoke too smoothly, and he had private meetings that were not listed on any official record. One evening, Morrow followed Hask at a distance through the lower corridors of the palace. He watched the ambassador meet with a figure he did not recognize. Someone in plain clothes, with the body language of a soldier, not a diplomat. They exchanged a small data device and parted without speaking. Then he accessed a communication relay near the lower corridor, one of the old ones that nobody maintained anymore, and found a fragment of an encrypted transmission. He could not read it, but he recognized the structure. He had seen data packages like this before, on battlefields and in war rooms. It was a targeting package. Someone was marking locations inside the palace. Entry points, sightlines, kill zones. Morrow stood alone in the dark corridor, staring at the data on his screen, and felt the old familiar weight settle onto his shoulders. The weight of knowing something terrible was coming and being the only one who could see it. He closed the screen and walked back to his quarters. He did not sleep that night. Morrow went to Lord Itherin the next morning. He brought the data fragment, his notes on Ambassador Hask's movements, and a timeline of every irregular meeting he had tracked over the past 2 weeks. He laid it all out on the desk, like evidence in a court case, because that is what it was. Itherin listened. He looked at the data. He touched the edge of the fragment file with one long finger. Then he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "You are seeing ghosts, Sergeant." "I am seeing a targeting package, sir. Entry points, sightlines, and timing windows. This is an attack plan. Ambassador Hask is a respected diplomat from a compact member world. You are suggesting that he is planning an assault on the most protected building in the Dominion based on one encrypted file and some hallway meetings. I am suggesting that you take the threat seriously and investigate. Your species sees violence everywhere, because violence is all you know. You come from a world of predators and disasters, and you cannot imagine a place where such things do not happen. This is Serethis Prime. The royal palace has stood for 3,000 years without a single breach. You are asking me to insult a foreign ambassador because a human soldier has a feeling. It is not a feeling, it is evidence. It is paranoia dressed in data." Itherin picked up the files and placed them in a drawer. "I will note your concerns in the record. You are dismissed." Morrow stood there for a long moment, looking at the drawer where his evidence had disappeared. Then he turned and walked out. He requested an audience with the Emperor directly. The request was denied. He tried to speak with the head of Palace Intelligence. He was told that Palace Intelligence did not consult with foreign military personnel. He approached 3 senior courtiers who he believed had influence. 2 of them refused to meet with him. The third listened for 5 minutes, then told him politely that he was overreacting. Nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody wanted to believe that their beautiful, perfect palace could be a target. They had lived so long without danger that they had forgotten what danger looked like. And the person trying to warn them was a human, a creature from a violent little world that had only joined the compact 5 years ago. What could he possibly know about threats at this level? Morrow sat alone in his quarters that evening and thought about his options. He had no authority here. He had no allies in the court. Every official channel was closed to him. But he still had one resource the Valanthi did not know about. He opened a private communication channel, one that used old military encryption the Galactic Compact did not monitor, because they did not think humans were clever enough to build encryption worth monitoring. He sent messages to 6 people. All of them were human. All of them were scattered across minor posts in various parts of the compact, just like him. Forgotten soldiers in forgotten positions. But they were still soldiers, and soldiers helped each other. Within 4 hours, he had responses. A human signals officer stationed at a compact relay hub managed to capture a fuller version of the encrypted transmission. A human analyst working in a minor trade office recognized the encryption method as Korvathi military grade. and a human intelligence operative who was officially listed as a filing clerk at a border station broke the code. The full message confirmed everything Morrow feared. It was a detailed attack plan for the Unity Gala, a grand celebration that would bring the entire Volanthi royal family together in one place in just 2 days. The plan called for a coordinated assault from multiple entry points, using mercenaries armed with military weapons. The attackers would strike during the height of the event, when the hall was most crowded and the exits were most blocked. And the plan had a second part. After the royal family was killed, the blame would be placed on humans. Evidence would be planted. Communications would be faked. The Korvathi faction would use the chaos to claim that the Death World species had turned violent and should be expelled from the compact. In the power vacuum that followed, Korvathi allies would move to seize control of Volanthi resource worlds. It was not just an assassination, it was a political overthrow, and humanity would be the scapegoat. Morrow read the decoded message 3 times. Then, he closed the channel, destroyed the communication records, and went to find Princess Viathi. He found her in her study. She was reading something on a glowing screen, and she looked up when he entered without knocking. She opened her mouth to scold him, but something in his face stopped her. "What is wrong?" she asked. He told her everything. He showed her the decoded message. He explained the attack plan, the timeline, the targets, and the plan to blame humanity. He spoke clearly and calmly, as he always did, but she could see something behind his eyes that she had not seen before. Not fear, exactly, something heavier. The look of a man who has seen war and recognizes its approach. Viathi was quiet for a long time after he finished. She stared at the decoded message on her personal screen. Her hands were very still in her lap. "Itharin will not believe this," she said. "No. My father's advisors will not believe this. No. The gala is tomorrow." "Yes." She looked at him. "What do you need?" "Authority. Your authority. Official permission to take control of your personal security and to operate freely within the palace during the gala. I need access to the weapons vault and the emergency communication systems, and I need you to trust me." The court will be furious. Itharin will see it as an insult. Itharin's guards are not ready for what is coming. I am. Viathi stood up. She crossed the room and stood very close to him, looking up into his face. She studied his eyes, those strange forward-facing predator eyes that had unsettled her from the first day. They were steady. They were certain. "I trust you," she said. "By the authority of the third princess of the Volanthi Dominion, Sergeant Cale Morrow was granted full operational command of her personal security detail for the duration of the Unity Gala." The order arrived in Lord Itharin's office like a slap across the face. Half the court was outraged. A human given authority over Volanthi security. It was unheard of. It was humiliating. Morrow did not care about their feelings. He had 20 hours until the gala, and he spent every one of them preparing. He studied the layout of the Grand Hall. He identified the most likely breach points. He placed emergency supplies in hidden locations throughout the palace. He reviewed the weapons vault and selected what he needed. He moved alone, quickly, and without asking for permission or help. The evening of the gala arrived, the grand hall filled with light and music and hundreds of the most powerful beings in the Dominion. Diplomats laughed and drank. Courtiers moved in elegant circles. The emperor sat on his crystal throne, surrounded by his children, his advisors, and his guards. Morrow stood at Viathi's side. He wore his Earth military armor over his court dress, and he carried weapons openly. The courtiers stared. Some whispered insults. Ambassador Hask, standing across the hall with a glass in his hand, looked at Morrow and smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed he had already won. Morrow leaned close to Viathi and spoke quietly. "When it starts, stay behind me, no matter what you hear." She nodded. Her hands were trembling, but her face was calm. The music played, the lights danced, and somewhere in the walls of the beautiful palace, the clock counted down to 0. The first explosion hit the east wall of the grand hall at exactly the moment the music reached its highest note. The timing was deliberate. The sound of the blast was swallowed by the sound of celebration, and for 2 full seconds, nobody in the hall understood what had happened. Moro understood. He was moving before the dust had settled. He grabbed Viathi by the arm and pulled her down behind a stone column. Around them, the hall erupted into chaos. Volanthi courtiers screamed and stumbled over each other, their long limbs tangling as they tried to flee. The crystal walls cracked and shattered, sending bright fragments across the floor like broken ice. The second explosion hit the north entrance, then the south. 3 breaches, perfectly timed, perfectly placed. Armed figures poured through the gaps in the walls. They were mercenaries, mixed species, heavily armed, moving in trained formation. They wore no insignia. They carried military-grade pulse rifles. They started shooting before the dust cleared. The Volanthi royal guards responded. They drew their ceremonial energy blades and moved to form a defensive line around the emperor. They were brave, they were disciplined, and they were completely outmatched. The mercenaries cut through the first line of guards in less than 10 seconds. The elegant warriors fell like tall grass before a blade. Their training had prepared them for duels of honor, not for a military assault with automatic weapons. Moro watched the first guards fall, and something clicked inside him. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was something older than both, something that lived deep in the bones of every human being. A switch that turned off the thinking part of the brain and turned on the part that had kept his species alive through ice ages and famines and wars that lasted generations. The part that said, "Fight now, think later, do not stop until it is over." He moved. Later, the surviving Volanthi would struggle to describe what they saw. They would use words like impossible and terrifying and animal, but none of those words would be quite right. What Moro did in the grand hall of the Volanthi royal palace was something the galaxy had never seen from a single individual. He came out from behind the column like a launched projectile. The first mercenary did not see him coming. Moro hit the alien at full speed, using his body weight and momentum to drive the attacker into the floor. The mercenary's weapon discharged into the ceiling. Moro took the rifle from the mercenary's broken hands and used it. He fired 3 times. 3 mercenaries dropped. He did not aim the way the Volanthi aimed, carefully and with elegant precision. He aimed the way humans aimed, fast and instinctive. His predator eyes locking onto targets with a focus that the aliens found deeply unnatural. Humans had binocular vision built for tracking prey across open ground. In a firefight, that vision became something close to supernatural. A pulse bolt hit him in the shoulder. He staggered, but did not fall. Volanthi would have collapsed from the pain alone. Moro's body flooded with adrenaline, a chemical that the Volanthi had no equivalent for. It shut down his pain receptors, accelerated his heart rate, and sharpened his senses to a razor edge. He kept fighting. He crossed the hall in a series of sprints, using overturned tables and broken columns as cover. He moved between positions with a speed that shocked the mercenaries. They had been told that humans were slow and primitive. They had been told wrong. Moro reached Viathi and her 2 younger siblings, who were huddled behind the ruins of the banquet table. The youngest was barely more than a child, shaking and silent with terror. Moro knelt in front of them. "Stay low. Follow me. Do not stop moving." He led them through the chaos. A mercenary appeared from behind a column and raised a weapon. Moro shot him without breaking stride. Another came from the left. Moro dropped the rifle, closed the distance in 2 steps, and broke the attacker's arm at the joint, before taking his weapon. The sound of the bones snapping cut through the noise of the battle like a crack of ice. He got the 3 royals to a secure room that he had prepared the day before. It was a small maintenance chamber with thick walls and a single reinforced door. He had stocked it with emergency supplies and a communication unit. "Lock this door," he told Viathi. "Do not open it for anyone but me." "Where are you going?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wide. "Back." She was right. The pulse bolt had torn through his shoulder, and blood was running down his arm. Human blood. Red and bright and warm. The Valanthi children stared at it with horrified fascination. They had never seen anything like it. "It is not important right now," Morrow said. He closed the door and waited until he heard the lock engage. Then he turned around and went back into the killing ground. The grand hall was a ruin. Crystal walls lay in shattered heaps. Bodies were scattered across the floor, most of them Valanthi guards. The mercenaries had pushed deep into the palace and were advancing toward the Emperor's position. Lord Etherin was there, fighting with desperate courage, but he was wounded, and his remaining guards were falling one by one. Morrow entered the main corridor that led to the throne room. 6 mercenaries were advancing down it, in formation. He took a position behind a broken support beam and waited until they were close enough. Then he fought. It lasted 4 minutes. In those 4 minutes, Morrow used every technique he had learned in 15 years of human warfare. He used the rifle until it was empty. He used a fallen guard's energy blade until it broke. He used his fists, his elbows, his knees. He used the environment, smashing a mercenary into a wall panel that cracked and sparked. He fought with a ferocity and endurance that the aliens could not comprehend. A Valanthi soldier would have been dead 3 times over. A Korvathi would have retreated after the first wound. Most galactic species fought with calculation, with careful measurement of risk and reward. Humans did not fight that way. Humans fought with something that had no translation in any galactic language. The closest word was stubbornness, but that was too small. It was a deep, ancient, burning refusal to stop. A biological imperative written into millions of years of survival on a world that never stopped trying to kill them. When the last mercenary in the corridor fell, Morrow was still standing, barely. His shoulder was torn open. He had a cut across his forehead that poured blood into his left eye. 2 of his ribs were cracked. He could feel all of it, distantly on the other side of the adrenaline wall. He found Ambassador Hask in a side chamber near the communications center. Hask was speaking rapidly into a device, coordinating the remaining mercenaries, directing them toward the Emperor. He looked up when Morrow entered the room, and for the first time, the smooth diplomatic mask cracked. There was fear underneath. "You cannot do this," Hask said. "I have diplomatic immunity. I am a representative of the Korvathi Confederation. You are a war criminal coordinating an attack on a civilian target," Morrow said. He walked toward Hask. The ambassador pulled a small energy pistol from his robes and fired. The bolt hit Morrow in the chest and burned through his armor. He kept walking. Hask fired again. Morrow kept walking. The ambassador's hands were shaking now. He tried to fire a 3rd time, but Morrow reached him first. He took the pistol away with one hand and broke Hask's arm with the other. The ambassador screamed, a high, thin sound that echoed off the chamber walls. Morrow forced him to the floor and activated the palace's open communication channel. "Broadcast this," Morrow said. Then he looked down at Hask. Tell them everything. Tell them who sent you, who funded this, and who was supposed to die tonight." Hask, broken and terrified, staring up at the bleeding, burning human who should have been dead 3 times over and was not, told them everything. The broadcast went out across the palace, across the city, across the system. The mercenaries heard their leader confessing. Their mission was exposed. Their escape routes were compromised. They began to surrender. It was over. Moro walked out of the communications chamber and into the ruined Grand Hall. Volanthi reinforcements were arriving now, flooding through the breached walls with weapons drawn. Too late. Always too late. He stood in the center of the shattered hall, covered in blood, most of it his own, some of it not. His armor was burned through in 3 places. His left arm hung at his side, barely functional. He was breathing hard, and each breath hurt. Lord Itheron was leaning against the throne, wounded but alive. He stared at Moro across the destroyed room. His expression was something beyond shock. It was the look of a man whose entire understanding of the universe had just been rewritten. The door to the secure room opened. Viathi walked out, followed by her siblings. She crossed the ruined hall, stepping over broken crystal and fallen bodies, her eyes fixed on Moro. She walked straight to him. She took his hand. In Volanthi culture, this was an act of profound intimacy. It was a declaration of trust, of bond, of recognition. It was something given only to those who had proven themselves beyond all question. The surviving courtiers gasped. The arriving guards stopped in their tracks. Viathi held the human's bloody hand in her delicate fingers and did not let go. Moro woke in a medical chamber that smelled like clean air and something faintly sweet. The ceiling above him was made of the same crystal as the rest of the palace, and it caught the morning light and scattered it into a dozen soft colors across the walls. He stared at it for a long time before he tried to move. Moving was a mistake. His body informed him of this immediately and with great enthusiasm. The shoulder was wrapped in some kind of Volanthi healing membrane that glowed faintly against his skin. His ribs were bound. The cut on his forehead had been sealed, but the skin around it was tight and sore. He lay back down and closed his eyes. You should not try to sit up yet. He opened his eyes. Viathi was sitting in a chair beside his bed. She looked tired. Her court robes were wrinkled, and her hair was not arranged in its usual perfect style. She had been there for a while. How long? He asked. The healers say your biology is remarkable. You should have died from the chest wound alone. They say your body has some kind of emergency system that keeps you functioning past the point where any reasonable organism would shut down. Adrenaline, Moro said, and stubbornness. They could not tell the difference. He almost laughed. It hurt, so he stopped. The days that followed were unlike anything Moro had experienced. The Korvathi conspiracy unraveled quickly once Hask's confession was broadcast. Investigations spread across the Galactic Compact like fire through dry grass. Multiple factions were found to be involved. Funds were traced. Communications were decoded. Arrests were made on 7 different worlds. The plot had been deep and wide, and its exposure shook the foundations of galactic politics. The Volanthi Emperor addressed his people 3 days after the attack. He stood in the rebuilt entrance of the Grand Hall, surrounded by his family and his surviving guards, and spoke in a voice that carried across the entire system through broadcast relays. He spoke about the attack. He spoke about the conspiracy. He spoke about the failure of his own court to see the danger, and the failure of his advisors to listen when the warning was given. And then he spoke about Moro. He told his people that the royal family survived because one human soldier, assigned to a meaningless ceremonial post, did what no one else in the palace could do. He had seen the threat. He had raised the alarm. He had been ignored, dismissed, and insulted. And when the attack came, he had stood between the royal family and death, and he had not moved. The emperor said that the Volanthi Dominion owed a debt to this human that could not be repaid with honors or titles. But he would try. Morrow was offered the Order of the Crystal Star, the highest military honor in the Dominion. He was offered estates, wealth, and a permanent position in the Emperor's inner court. He declined all of it, every single thing. He accepted one title, Royal Protector, a rank that had not been held by a non-Volanthe in the entire history of the Dominion. It was not a reward, it was a job, and Morrow wanted the job. The galaxy noticed. Within weeks, requests began arriving from other species, other governments, other royal households across the compact. They wanted human protectors. They wanted human security advisors. They wanted humans embedded in their military structures and their intelligence services. The species they had dismissed as violent primitives from a dangerous little planet were suddenly the most sought-after allies in the galaxy. Humanity's reputation changed overnight. Not slowly, not gradually, but all at once, like a light being turned on in a dark room. They were no longer the Death World newcomers who were tolerated out of diplomatic courtesy. They were something else now. Something that the galaxy respected and, in quiet moments, feared. Lord Itherin came to see Morrow in the medical wing before he was fully healed. The Volanthe guard chief moved slowly. He had taken wounds of his own during the attack, and he carried them with less ease than Morrow carried his. He stood at the foot of the bed and was silent for a long time. "I buried your report," Itherin said finally, "in my desk drawer. I read it after the attack. Every word of it was correct. Every warning you gave me was accurate. If I had listened to you, my guards would still be alive." Morrow looked at him. "You could not have known. I chose not to listen because you are human, and I believe that meant you had nothing to teach me." Itharian's voice was very quiet. "I was wrong." He bowed. It was a deep, formal bow, the kind that a Volanthe gave only to someone they recognized as their superior in a matter of honor. Then he straightened and asked the question he had come to ask. "Will you help me rebuild the Royal Guard?" "Yes," Morrow said, "on one condition." "Name it." "The next class of recruits includes every species, not just Volanthe. Every species in the compact that wants to serve, including humans." Itharian hesitated. The idea was radical. The Royal Guard had been Volanthe for 3,000 years, but 3,000 years of tradition had almost gotten the entire royal family killed. He nodded. Agreed. The palace was repaired. The crystal walls were regrown. The grand hall was rebuilt, and new security systems were installed, designed by a human sergeant who knew what real threats looked like. The court adjusted slowly, the way that large and old institutions always adjust, with resistance and grumbling and eventual acceptance. Morrow did not change much. He still wore his boots on the crystal floors. He still stood against walls and watched. He still said very little. But the courtiers no longer whispered insults when he passed. Some of them nodded. A few of them bowed. One evening, several weeks after the attack, Viathi found Morrow standing on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The sun was setting, and the towers of Serethis caught the fading light and held it, glowing like a forest of golden candles. It was beautiful. It was always beautiful here. She stood beside him and watched the sunset in silence for a while. Then she spoke. "Were you afraid?" He watched the light change on the towers. He thought about the question the way he thought about everything, carefully and honestly. "Yes," he said. "During the attack, when you went back into the hall?" "Every second." She turned to look at him. "Then why did you do it?" He was quiet for a moment. The wind moved across the balcony and tugged at his hair, and he looked out at the city below, at the millions of lives moving through their evening routines, unaware of how close they had come to losing everything. "Because someone had to," he said, "and I could." Viathi stood beside him on the balcony and thought about what that meant. She thought about her people, who had built a civilization of light and beauty and grace, and who had forgotten that beauty alone could not keep them safe. She thought about the galaxy, which had looked at humans and seen only violence and crudeness and danger, and had missed the thing that mattered most. Humans did not fight because they loved violence. They fought because they loved the things they were protecting. They formed bonds with the people around them, bonds so deep and so fierce that they would walk into fire rather than let those people come to harm. The galaxy had 100 species that were smarter, faster, stronger, and more elegant than humans. But none of them would do what Morrow had done. None of them would stand in a doorway with a broken body and a stolen weapon and refuse to fall, not for glory, not for honor, but because there were people behind them who could not protect themselves. That was what a death world made. Not monsters, not savages, protectors. 2 months later, a new shuttle landed on the crystal platform outside the palace. A young human soldier stepped out, blinking in the pale blue light. She was nervous. She was out of place. Her boots were too heavy for the delicate ground, and she carried herself with the awkward stiffness of someone who knew she did not belong. Morrow met her at the gate. He looked at her, and he saw himself as he had been on his first day, lost, unwelcome, and underestimated. He clasped her shoulder with one strong hand and spoke quietly. "They will not understand you at first. That is all right. Do the job. They will learn." She nodded. She straightened her back. She walked into the palace. And in the great library of Serathis Prime, where the cultural records of the Volanthi Dominion were kept and updated and preserved for future generations, a scholar entered a new proverb into the archives. It was a small addition, just a few words, but it carried the weight of everything that had happened and everything that had changed. The proverb read, "When the stars go dark, stand beside a human. They were born in the dark, and they know the way through."